And what we'd like to ask you, and we're still in the introductory stage, okay? Don't worry if you don't understand all this right now, but that's not the point. None of us are meant to understand all this right now. But we wanted to have a time where you actually discover, where you actually do activities and think in a way through all these different levels that we're actually going to talk about and go through this evening. And in the time we have, we can only do so much, right? But I think this was a really good way to practically apply what we're going to go through tonight in an introductory way, to really jump right in, sort of kind of dive right in to the different levels that we're going to be talking about this evening. So, a few questions before Zarni continues with the presentation through some more expository teaching. Just before we go to that PowerPoint again, we'd like to ask you, for the group that just listed the 10 activities, I think they're over here, what level, you see here on both sides, because we want all of you to be able to see it, hope I'm not blocking the way for anyone, a list of different levels, which we'll explain more carefully and more deeply in a moment. But looking at those different words, where do you guys think you were on that list?
The last one, remembering.
Okay, remembering. And they are correct. Okay, very good, excellent. Okay, you're correct. They were simply listing, right? And categorizing some words in alphabetical order. So they were at that level of remembering. Okay? How about the group who designed the poster, which was over here? The group who actually put together that poster, just kind of selling Christmas for everything it is and everything it means to us. What do you think you guys were? Okay, yes. Okay, excellent. They were right at the top, right? Creating, discovering. Now, does that mean that they were doing anything better or greater than the other group was doing?
Again. I think harder than later.
A bit harder? Okay, that's a good point. Was it any more important than what the first group did?
No.
It may have been a bit more difficult, a bit more challenging, taking a bit more time. Some of the groups finished earlier than others. There's probably different reasons for that, right? This is a hot topic when you talk about Bloom's taxonomy. Whether some level is more important than another, or is there a part that's more meaningful? Okay, we can admit that there's probably different levels that are more difficult, more challenging, engage us more in different kinds of activities. And we'll get into that a little bit and give you a chance to share it towards the end. So think about that. That's some very good points. Thank you. Excellent points. And let's take one more. Writing the procedure for decorating a Christmas tree. The group that did that, writing the procedure for decorating a Christmas tree. Where do you think you were on this continuum? Okay? Yes. Okay, you were applying. Okay, you were applying. Okay, excellent. Very good. So, I think you have a good basic knowledge of this already, right? And hopefully through that activity, it's kind of a good introduction to how our students in our schools, in our classroom environment, can actually be doing all different kinds of activities, thinking in all different kinds of ways, at all different kinds of levels. And I would be as bold to say as maybe there isn't any one that's more important than another. Maybe they're all connected in some intricate way. Maybe we need them all. Okay? And I'll just leave it at that for now. And we'll give us time to discuss that later. But I'm going to turn it back over to Zarni, and she's going to share a bit of background on Mr. Bloom.
When we're talking about Bloom's taxonomy, we cannot forget Benjamin Bloom. So who was Benjamin Bloom? Here's the guy, and he made a lot of major contribution to the classification of educational objectives. He was from Pennsylvania. He's American Jewish, psychologist, and he was born on February 21st in 1913. He's from Pennsylvania, and he got his bachelor and master from Pennsylvania State University. And he got his PhD from University of Chicago in 1942, and that's where his major work started. And he was an instructor in the Department of Education in the University of Chicago. Now, we will learn more about Bloom's background and why he developed an educational taxonomy. In 1956, he had a group of educational psychologists, and he directed his attention to organizing educational objectives according to their cognitive complexity. Now, earlier, David asked all of us to think about what is cognitive. You remember? Thinking. Now, cognitive complexity. So, we already discussed a little bit briefly about different thinking level from simple, remembering to different levels, more complex level. For example, it's easy to recall the information than create a poster, which is like totally a new thing. So he organized different educational objectives according to their different thinking levels. And this is for more reliable procedure for assessing the students and the outcome of educational practice. So I'm going to talk about what is more reliable procedure for assessing students. What do you think? What does he mean by more reliable procedure for assessing students? Can we just give the test to assess the students? So what is he talking about reliable procedure for assessing students?
I think if you tie it into taxonomy, I think the idea is that, let's say, for example, you're doing something like creating, then you might do something like an activity that you just did, where you say, okay, this group's going to create a poster to say, let's say, now assuming you did, obviously tonight you just did the activity, but if you had done a unit where you had classes on the meaning of Christmas and maybe, you're talking about loving each other and so on, and then you did that activity, that is a different type of evaluation. You can evaluate whether they understand it from what they create. I mean, to use a ridiculous example, I mean, if they create a picture of people machine gunning each other down in the streets, you obviously know that, guess what, they lost the message, they didn't get the message. Right? I mean, I'm being extreme to make a point. But he's saying that that's what you do. You have a different procedure for evaluating. You don't just give them a pencil and paper test. Is that more or less where you're going?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Andy. Here I also want to share a little bit of my experience when, as an undergrad student, I was an elementary education major. So when we start taking education classes, one of the professors asked us to write the objectives for lesson. And a lot of us, no teaching experience, we just write after the lesson, the students will understand this. The students will understand, the students will know about the continents and oceans. And after that, the professor asked the students, after the lesson, the students will know and understand. How do you know the students know? We were like, well, after the lesson, the students will know. But she insisted, how do you know they know? Well, we will see, after I give that lesson, I will give the quiz, and then when we find out, get the quiz result, we will find out the students will know, or the students really understand. And she said, well, this is very vague objectives, and we were all very frustrated. And then she introduced about the very specific verbs to use during the lessons. For example, if you look around this room, we put some posters. It might be hard to see from where you are sitting. The main point is she wants us to be very specific about learning objectives. Not just understand or know, but she wants us to specific. After the lesson, the students will be able to recall or list or create. And it has then, our lesson is aligning with the assessment. So it is just not just the lesson, it is also one of the ways to assess our students, whether the students are learning or not. We just can assume after the lesson, my students will understand about this lesson. We don't know. How do we know? So it was a very good experience for me from that class, and I think Bloom's taxonomy will help all the teachers when we are creating the lesson, how to assess the students, how to design the lesson so the students get the best out of our lesson. Now this is another thing. Bloom found that over 95% of test questions that students encounter require them to think only at the lowest possible level, which is the recall of information. So can anyone give me an example of the test question, which is just simply recalling the information? Yes.
Name the different continents.
Yes, name the different continents. Actually, this week at our school, we are giving them the quarter exams, and as I was preparing for this, it is a pretty shocking thing. 95% of the test questions are basically recalling the questions, and Bloom made this point out 50 years ago, but I think in a lot of the countries, we will probably say it is still true. 95% of the test questions are still a lot of recalling information. And after that, I look at my test questions for the students, and yes, there are a lot of questions basically just recalling the information, which some of the questions are, I think, very useful for the students. I mean, students they will not understand without recalling the information. So I'm not saying it's not important, but just one of the ways we can design our test to be like different way of assessment, not just recalling the information. So in 1956, Bloom and his team of educational psychologists developed a classification of levels of thinking behaviors thought to be important in the process of learning. So they came up with the Bloom's taxonomy, and David and I will be talking more about detail into that different classification of levels of thinking behaviors, which are very important in learning process.